Namaste. Mythic Society welcomes all the scholars for this Dr. M.H. Krishna sponsored talk by Professor Vasant Shinde. Before I introduce Professor Vasant Shinde, I would like to speak a few words about Professor M.H. Krishna. Dr. M.H. Krishna uh, fully expanded. His name is Dr. Mysore Hatti Krishnayangar. Uh, Born in 1892, he lived up to 1947. A trained scholar in archaeology at the University College of London, a historian, archaeologist, epigraphist, and an authority in Indian numismatics, a pioneer in the new field of Indology, involving the study of Indian culture, history, music, and traditions from a historic perspective. He was responsible for discovery of one of the oldest Kannada inscriptions, the Halmadi Shasana, or Halmadi inscription dating back to 350 AD. He discovered the remains of the city of Isila near Brahmagiri during his excavations at Chandravalli, Chittorgarh district. And also, he wrote on the forgotten tomb of Shivaji as father, that is Shahaji, which was placed by Sri M.H. Krishna. Now, in his memory, Dr. M.H. Krishna's son, Sri Ranganath Mysore Hatti, he's from California, and their family members have kept this donation at the Mythic Society. Now, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce Professor Vasant Shinde and all the scholars participating in this webinar to this talk. Okay. Now, Professor Vasant Shinde will be shortly giving a talk on recent findings at Rakhigardi. Professor Shinde, Vice-Chancellor of the Deccan College Postgraduate and Research Institute, deemed to be University in Pune, is an internationally renowned archaeologist, Vice-Chancellor of the Deccan College, PG Research Institute, deemed university. He obtained PhD from this university, working on the proto-historic archaeology on early settlements in central Tapi Basin. He has been teaching PG courses in archaeology since 1982. He has supervised 50 masters and about 30 doctoral students, in addition to 17 visiting scholars from abroad. Professor Shinde is a pioneer in archaeological research since past 3 decades, specializing in the proto-history of South Asia and the field of archaeology. He has directed a vast number of excavations around India, from Harappan sites in Gujarat and Haryana to Chalcolithic sites in Madhya Pradesh and Deccan to protohistoric and early historic sites in Rajasthan and Maharashtra. Presently, he has been directing a very prestigious research project at the largest Harappan site of Rakhigardi in Haryana. He has been awarded with a number of honors within India and abroad. He has authored 8 books, 10 edited books, 117 articles in reputed journals, and about 60 articles in international journals. He has initiated experiments in flint knapping. He has established the Society of South Asian Archaeology, SOSAA, with a view to promoting young archaeologists and further global collaboration. He has also been actively involved in public archaeology and established groups in Maharashtra, Rajasthan, and Haryana to protect the cultural heritage of the country and generate awareness of the same among the general public. Today, he will be sharing with us his experiences by giving a talk on the recent findings in Rakhigardi. Professor Vasant Shinde, I welcome you, and I also welcome Sri Prasanna Kumar, our Managing Committee member, Sri Dhananjay Ghare, Dr. Nagaraj Sharma, Dr. Aran Iyengar, and all the Mythic Society enthusiasts and members for this talk. Professor Vasant Shinde, we welcome you once again, and we have you.
Thank you.
And please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. First, before I start, I would like to greet all of you on the occasion of Holi. I request all of you to be safe during this pandemic. Stay at home. Uh, I would like to thank the organizers for arranging this very important and prestigious lecture. It is MS Krishna Memorial Lecture, and I am indeed honored to have this, to participate in this. Also, I would like to mention that I completed this Rakhigardi first phase of the research in 2016 and 17, and I am in the final stage of writing the report now. Maybe next 6 months, the report will be out. And again, I am initiating now, maybe within a month or so, a new research at the site of Rakhigardi, because whatever maybe lacunas we have identified, now that will be taken care in the next phase of the research, and this will certainly go on for 3 years, but I'm hoping that it will continue for 5 more years. So and this is a very very important site. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to first tell you the significance of the discovery of the Harappan civilization, which happened exactly 100 years ago. There are two important significance of the discovery of the Harappan civilization. One is that before the discovery of the Harappan civilization, it was believed by most of the scholars, mostly the Western scholars, that there's a big gap in the history of the country. And India jumps from Stone Age to the Stupa period. That was the statement made by one of the historians. And most of the scholars thought that that the settled life started much later, in fact, in the Indian subcontinent, maybe by 6th century BC, not before that. But with the discovery of the Harappan civilization, the settled life was taken back by almost 3,000 years at one stroke. So that is very important. And now, India, is boasting of a history which is a continuous for 2 million years. In fact, the earliest stone tool that is found in the Indian subcontinent is dated to around 2 million. So from 2 million to the present, we have continuous history. Perhaps, India is one of the few countries in the world, perhaps, maybe China has to some extent, where we have unbroken history for such a long period. So that is the maybe significance of the discovery of the Harappan civilization exactly 100 years ago. And also, the Harappan civilization was found to be contemporary to the Mesopotamian and Egyptian civilizations. And now we know that that Harappans, Mesopotamians, and Egyptian civilizations, they had very close interaction. Particularly the trade network, and there is a lot of impact, cultural impact on each other. In fact, so that is also very very significant. But let me also tell you that 100 years ago, maybe the excavation at Harappa and Mohenjo-daro started in 2020-21, but it took almost 4 years for the excavators, particularly John Marshall, who was the Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India and the Director of the excavations at both Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. Now he was not really able to understand the antiquity of the remains that they were excavating. Many scholars thought that they're excavating maybe Buddhist remains, because at Mohenjo-daro there is a stupa on the site which is still visible, and people thought that this is a Buddhist stupa and this is a Buddhist site. But now the recent work done by Michael Janssen, the German scholar, now he has established that that particular stupa-like structure actually belongs to the Harappan period. So there's a lot of confusion. And finally on 20th September 1924, John Marshall announced the discovery of the Harappan civilization. Now it so happened, in fact, John Marshall was in constant touch with his friend Leonard Uli from who was excavating at Ur and Uru in Mesopotamia. And the Mesopotamian history, in fact, Mesopotamian history starts from 3000 BC. The written records, they have written records which have been deciphered. Whereas, we do not, we have, written records, in fact, in the Harappan period, but we are not been able to decipher them. So for us, the history begins from 3rd century BC or 4th century BC onward. For the Mesopotamians, it starts from 3000 BC. And, they have number of, maybe written records, maybe, a lot of dating material, in fact, at Ur and Uruk in the archaeological sites. So when John Marshall showed him the remains, particularly the seals and ceilings from the site of Harappa and Mohenjo to John Marshall, to Leonard Uli, Leonard Uli immediately recalled that no similar evidence is found, in fact, at Ur, and the level in which the remains are found are dated to around 2450 BC, and that is how he got the idea about the antiquity of the remains that he excavated. Then of course now today till today we have discovered nearly 2000 Harappan sites. And now majority of them, in fact, around 1500 sites are on the Indian side, and the remaining are in Pakistan. So very vast area was occupied by the Harappans. And so far, we have been able to identify 5 Harappan mega cities. It was thought that this Mohenjo-daro is the maybe biggest Harappan city, followed by Harappa, and then Rakhigardi and you know Dholavira and Ganiviriwala. This was the sequence. But the work that we started in Pat at the site of Rakhigardi almost 10 years ago. Now, first 2 years, we spent in understanding the extent of the site because there were different opinions given by different scholars, and we wanted to find out scientifically what is the total area of the site. And I'm happy to share this particular data that the site is spread over an area of 550 hectare, which is almost double the size of the so-called the biggest Harappan city of Mohenjo-daro. So, but still, we are not excited because we want to know because we have not been able to understand whether that 550 hectare area that we talked today, whether that was occupied at one and the same time or gradually it was occupied because of the shifting of the maybe settlement gradually or occupying more area in fact in subsequent periods. So we need to establish that, and unless we do that we will not claim that the site of Rakhigardi is the biggest Harappan city. That is very important. Secondly, the site has produced very good evidence about the development from early levels or what we call as the early Harappan to the mature Harappan or the phase of the civilization. I would like to explain also that the two terms that we use, one is the Harappan culture and the other one is the Harappan civilization. The time span of the Harappan culture is very vast. It starts from maybe 6,000 or even 5,500 BC. There are a number of sites now in the Saraswati Basin where we have quite early dates for the Harappan culture, beginning of the Harappan culture. So from 5,500, at least I put this at 5,500 BC because we have series of dates. So from 5,500 BC till 2,600 BC, the culture was constantly growing, and we have a very good evidence about the growth of the city at the site of Rakhigardi, which I'm going to show you. Rakhigardi, and there are maybe half a dozen sites around Rakhigardi which have been excavated. Some of them have been excavated by the Archaeological Survey of India, some by Deccan College. So, that is the maybe the early phase of the Harappan culture, and then that early phase is transformed into civilization, into urban phase around 2,600 BC, and that urban phase is called the Harappan civilization. From 2,600 BC to 1900 BC is the phase of the Harappan civilization, or we also use the term like mature Harappan phase. And then up to 1900 BC, of course, the decline starts, and the culture has survived in a decadent form, we call it as the late Harappan culture, and that continues up to maybe 1400 or 1300 BC in the Indian subcontinent. So that is the so we have a very good evidence about the transformation from early to mature at the site of Rakhigardi. Then, of course, there are some very important issues in early Indian history. I'm not going to discuss them in great detail, but the evidence that we have generated now it has got a lot of implications on these issues, and now we are in a position to throw scientific data, scientific light on some of the vexing issues in fact in early Indian history. For example, Aryan invasion or migration. Still, there are different opinions. We have generated scientific data in this particular respect. Then also there is a lot of debate about who were the Harappan people, who are the maybe South Asian people who began the maybe the development of maybe agriculture and who developed the early maybe civilization in one of the early civilizations in fact in the world. So still there are some people who believe that that they are indigenous people. Some say that maybe they are not indigenous people. Also, Vedic culture and Indo-European language. There is a lot of. I'm going to maybe tell you about this at the end of my talk. What is my view on this? Which is circumstantial evidence. In fact, we do not have direct evidence for Vedic culture or the Indo-European language, but the circumstantial evidence that we have that points towards certain things, which I'm going to discuss at the end. Then the most of the early hypotheses about regarding maybe Vedic culture, Aryan migration, invasion, they were they were unscientific hypotheses based merely on inference. They did not have scientific data. They did not have any kind of data. And now, in fact, for the first time, we have generated scientific evidence. And I'm going to talk about three different kinds of evidence. The conclusion that we have drawn, it is not based on any one particular evidence. We have three sets of data, three sets of evidences, and they match in fact with each other very well. So that is that is the kind of data that I'm going to speak. In fact, those who have read our papers in fact in Shale and Science, there we have discussed mostly the genetic data, but I'm also going to discuss the archaeological data, which indicates the maybe indigenous beginning and the growth in this. And also we have generated for the first time the genetic data on the Harappan culture, and now we know who are the Harappan people. And also for the first time we have generated the what we call as the craniofacial data. For the first time we are showing the world how the Harappan people look like. And there also we can show that there is a continuity impact in that. So in both in all the three evidences, archaeological, genetic, and craniofacial, we can see a continuity from Harappans till the modern time. So that is very important, and we have the scientific data for this. Now this particular research has come, particularly the archaeogenetic. I call this as archaeogenetic data. So the archaeogenetic data and craniofacial data has has come after 100 years of research on the Harappan culture. Exactly, in 1920 the research started, and in 2019-20 we produced this very important research. And here this was possible because of the multidisciplinary and multi-institutional cooperation, which is very important. In India we do not do that, but if you want to really produce a very highly scientific data, then we need to undertake multidisciplinary research, and also people from different institutions. Now here the research was taken undertaken, the principal agency of course was Deccan College, but then we also had collaboration with the State Department of Haryana Archaeology Department, and also with the CCMB, Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology in Hyderabad, where one of my collaborators, Neeraj Rai, was he did the scientific analysis there. And then of course later of course he has shifted to Virubhusani Institute of Paleosciences in Lucknow now. But because and then of course what we did, let me tell you also a little bit about our approach, the research approach that we adopted. This is how it should be done. First, we took proper precaution in fact in generating the primary data, which I'm going to show you. Secondly, we thought, I was very keen that this particular research is done only by Indian scientists, Indian archaeologists, and Indian scientists. So we started with that. We had achieved the final status. In fact, we had achieved the results, and then at one stage, maybe in 2017-18, we were about to publish that data, which was generated by only Indian archaeologists and Indian scientists. But then later we after discussion we realized that the scientists from other parts of the world, so-called this maybe the ancient DNA scientists. Now these are the people who might raise objection. They might maybe raise some doubts about the approach that we adopted, and they might say that maybe your approach was not right. You are not done this research. You are not done this analysis, that analysis, like that. And so there will be a lot of maybe these type of questions will be raised after the publication. So then what we did, in fact, we decided that we have the data, of course, we have done the analysis. So we created three libraries of the data that we had. So one we supplied to the Harvard University, Harvard Medical School, where which has got the perhaps the biggest ancient DNA laboratory in the world, and the other site was shared with the Korean scientists. The Seoul National University has one of the finest ancient forensic science departments, and they did the research. What we wanted from them, not the analysis that we have done. In fact, we have, because we had done the basic analysis. We wanted them to check, and cross check, and so we wanted the results from them, without revealing what are our results. In fact, so after we got the results from from three different maybe institutions, particularly in Harvard, in fact, there are scientists from 16 different countries who are working on this particular issue. So they have, they have participated in this particular research, and perhaps this was considered to be the most prestigious research in the world. In fact, in 2019, November or December, sometimes, there was a big international conference on genomics in China, and they had identified every year. In fact, they hold conferences every year, and they identified 9 breakthrough researches in the field in 2019, and the research at Rakhigardi was considered the best research on the top. In fact, so that was identified. They had invited me, in fact, but I could not go. But then they have sent this the trophies and all this important one. Maybe I also accept that the hypothesis that you have proposed, in shale and science, some of them should have not been there, because we just followed the tide. We did not go against tide. And in both the papers, we have mentioned that after 2000 BC, maybe there's a large scale migration of the maybe steppe people in Indian subcontinent, which is not the case. In fact, there is a movement in fact happening, but no migration or invasion after 2000 BC, which is also important. And after considering this, maybe the archaeological data, genetic data, and also craniofacial data, now we have different evidence, different maybe conclusions. So, and also there's a lot of maybe comments in the fact that some people say that this is politically oriented research, which is not in fact, because this particular research was started by me in 2006 at the site of Farmana. Somehow we could not succeed there. Had we succeeded there, we could have published maybe in 2009 or 10, and the results would have been same. They cannot be changed because this is a highly scientific data and it is in public domain. But at the same time, also we know that this is a beginning. So maybe some of the conclusions that maybe we have drawn, maybe they need more scientific data, of course. So at this stage, the data is small, but we are getting some hint that this is how this maybe the implications are in fact on Indian history. So that is a kind of maybe the background that I wanted to give to you, and just to show that what is the cultural sequence in Indian subcontinent. It starts from maybe lower Paleolithic, which is around 2 million, and there is a continuity in fact from 2 million till the beginning of the early producing early food producing era, that is Neolithic phase, which is around 7000 BC. That is the beginning. So, and from 7000 BC, of course, there is a continuity till maybe the modern time. So, this is a brief, maybe a brief, background about, the cultural history of the Indian subcontinent. And then, initially it was thought that, that most of the developments have come from the West, including the maybe agriculture. It has come from the West, maybe from maybe Mesopotamia region, maybe from maybe the Fertile Crescent region. So we were not capable. In fact, this is what people, the most of the scholars wanted to suggest, that we were not capable of maybe innovation and carrying out any developments. So people came from outside, maybe from the West, and they initiated agriculture, they initiated cultural development in this part. But now, we have data from different parts, particularly, we have data from the Indian subcontinent, where the beginning of agriculture goes back to 7000 BC. Then also from Mesopotamia, which is slightly earlier, but maybe around 7000 BC, we have the identical evidence. In Egypt also, maybe, slightly later, but at the same time. and in China. So it is now clear that the developments were happening independently in all these, maybe four different regions. But at the same time, people were in touch with each other right from the beginning of maybe settled life, not only during the Harappan times, but right from the beginning of settled life. And because of that, because they were in touch with each other, maybe initially for the trade purpose, they started maybe maybe adopting a number of different traditions from each other, and that is quite clear. Also, there was a movement. In fact, let me make it clear also that there was a movement of the people happening between different regions. All these, maybe the four regions I'm showing. We don't know much about China, but we know about maybe Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Indus. That people were in touch with each other, and they were traveling. In fact, in all these different regions, and some of them were maybe settling. In fact, in different regions, and because of that, we find the mixing of genes. In fact, right from the beginning. So that is also very very important. Evidence we have. And of course, this map gives you idea about the location of maybe Mesopotamian, Egyptian, Dilmun, Magan, and Harappan region. And then of course I come to the Harappan site, in fact Harappan region. I mentioned to you, in fact, there are five cities. This is the region that was under the occupation of the Harappans. Quite a huge area, almost 2 million square kilometer area, which is almost double the size of Pakistan. So that is the that is the area that was under the Harappans. Whereas Mesopotamians were maybe located in maybe small river basin, same as the Egyptians. And in this area, we have discovered nearly 2,000 Harappan sites so far. And these are the locations of maybe in the left hand upper corner, you can see the location of the Harappan mega cities, or the cosmopolitan cities. So we have Rakhigardi now, the biggest Harappan city. Then maybe Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Dholavira, and Ganveriwala. Out of five cities, only Ganveriwala is not excavated. Otherwise, we have excavated all the four Harappan megacities. And also, I would like to mention that today, the history that we talk about, the Harappan history, it is more biased because we have generated huge data from Harappan cities, particularly from the maybe Harappan civilization cities, and we are using this data from the Harappan cities for the reconstruction of the Harappan lifestyle. Whereas out of 2,000 sites, there were large number of maybe small settlements, there were agricultural settlements, there were big and small, maybe villages, there were Harappan ports, maybe Harappan manufacturing centers, etc. We have not really excavated maybe Harappan, maybe a farming village on large scale, or Harappan maybe port on large scale, or even Harappan maybe manufacturing center on large scale. So unless we have data from all these different categories of sites, we cannot claim that we have reconstructed the holistic history of the Harappans. So we need to work on this particular strategy in future. And of course, there are two regions which are very important for the Harappans. One is of course the Indus River basin. You can see the location of the Indus River, and the other one of course the Ghaggar Hakra River basin, which is identified with the Rigvedic Saraswati basin. So Saraswati and Indus, these were the two important basins for the Harappans. And of course, I'm not going to discuss, in great detail about the identification of Saraswati, but the efforts were made right from 1746 for to identify the river Saraswati, and on the basis of the location given, on the basis of the geography and geology mentioned in fact in the Vedic text, on the basis of maybe the terrain through which this particular river flows, it is now established that the Ghaggar Hakra was the ancient river Saraswati, and now we have in fact along the dried river base, river bed, or the river bed, which disappeared at one stage. We have large number of settlements. So perhaps the Saraswati basin was much flow, maybe favored by the Harappans, and nearly two-thirds of the Harappan settlements are found in fact in the Saraswati basin. So in this, you can see the reconstruction of the river Saraswati, which maybe disappeared at one stage. We do not have scientific data for the causes of the disappearance and the period, in fact, when it exactly happened. But we can use archaeological data to identify the disappearance of the river Saraswati, because the settlement data that we have on this particular river bank, we have mostly the early Harappan sites and the mature Harappan sites, whereas the late Harappan sites go away from this particular river bank. So that means maybe around after 1900 or 2000 BC, the river started be losing its significance. Maybe started maybe disappearing or drying up, and because of that, people have started moving away from the river banks. So that is the kind of data that we have. So this data is very, very important, and this points towards the event, in fact, when exactly this particular event may have happened. And we have, of course, this again. You can see, the important location of important sites and the two river basins that which were covered by the Harappans. Then I'm not. This is not from the site of Rakhigardi, of course. This is from the site of Mehergarh. Just to give a background, because before, what was the situation before the Harappan culture? The situation in fact in Indian subcontinent, that maybe around 7,000 or 7,500 BC, the early life began. In fact, the settled life began in Indian subcontinent, and this is the site of Mehergarh, which is in Pakistan at the Bolan Pass exactly. Now there, we have found the earliest evidence in the Indian subcontinent. It starts from 7,000 or 7,500 BC, and then from 7,000 to maybe 7,500 BC till the Harappan culture. There's a gradual growth happening, in this particular at this particular site. So we have a strong precedence. In fact, you can see the kind of evidence that is found in fact in the early levels, very flimsy and maybe small mud structures. And then, of course, we have the evidence about the domestication of animal. These are the animals like the cattle, sheep, goat, dog, even pig and dog. These are the animals which were domesticated. We have the evidence of that. Then also the domestication of wheat and barley started. We have the actual specimens from the side. So this is very important. This indicates that the local people have begun this particular activity. Not that people came from outside and they started experimenting. Not like that. It is the local people who started experimenting, and we have the evidence of. So this is kind of evidence that we have from the earliest levels. A lot of the implements required for the domestic activities. Then the burial custom that they started. This particular custom or the tradition continues from Harappans, from the early phase at Mehergarh to the Harappans. So there is a lot of continuity from the a phase which is pre-Harappan in nature. So from that phase to the Harappans, we can see a gradual growth happening, and also development of sciences, basic sciences and technologies. These are the this is the kind of evidence that we have. They develop maybe basic crafts that was required for the people, and also at the same time they started importing raw materials from different or far off places. We have we have some evidence in fact from Oman. In fact, at the site of Mehergarh, there are some shale. I don't know whether we have. Yes, yes, you can see here. The pearls are from Oman. They're found at the site of Mehergarh. That means they establish trade contact with Oman, the people living in fact along the Oman coast, and they started maybe interacting with them. Also, we have some data from the Karachi coast, which is also quite far, maybe almost 700 to 800 kilometers away from Mehergarh. So that is also important, that right, and this also is evident that right from the beginning people were establishing contacts with people from far off places, and then that mixing was happening right from the beginning. This is a kind of maybe structures. In fact, in the subsequent phases, there's a proper development in the structural activities at the site. And then, of course, at one stage they introduce pottery. This is around maybe 6,500 BC. And then, of course, it continues from that to the Harappan times. And then, of course, I come to the site of Rakhigardi, which is very, very important. Rakhigardi, I'm not going to speak only about Rakhigardi. I began research, in fact, at Girawat, Farmana, and Mitatal also before Rakhigardi. And then, of course, I shifted to the site of Rakhigardi. But this is the, Rakhigardi is located, in fact, in the Saraswati Basin. Perhaps the biggest, Harappan city was located, in fact, in the Saraswati Basin. And the Archaeological Survey of India, in fact, had done some research for 3 years from 1997 to 2000. And they identified, or they have named the different localities that is found. There are 7 localities which they identified. And we have discovered 2 more. So there are 9 localities now. So that's a huge area. And it is not directly on the bank of River Saraswati, but on maybe close to one of the major tributaries called Drushyadoti, which is mentioned in fact in the Vedic text. So it is close to the river Drushyadoti. So the whole, entire Saraswati basin was well watered. There are maybe rivers, small rivers. There are a lot of water available, and at the same time, the area is quite safe because very few rivers here they get frequent flooded. Unlike the Indus River, Indus River gets frequently flooded, and therefore we do not have so many sites as we have on the banks of River Saraswati. And then of course we have generated these 3D maps of the site, major portion of the site. Out of 550 hectare, only 50 hectare is intact. The remaining portion, almost 500 hectare area, was destroyed by the people. And also at the same time, you can see that the gray portion that you see here, that is the modern occupation, and below the modern occupation, there is a Harappan deposit. So it is a huge site, but there are a lot of problems. A lot of area has been destroyed. A lot of area is under modern occupation. A lot of areas under agriculture, etc. So because of that, we don't see such a big site that you can see the photograph. All these are all this is part of the Harappan city at Rakhigardi, which is below the modern settlement, and only this portion of the site, which is intact because it is protected by the Archaeological Survey of India. So we have mound number 1 here. This is mound number 2 here. Mound number 3. The mound number 4 is quite big. In fact, here 4 and 5 they are adjacent to each other. And mound number 6 is of course away from this, which is a private land now. And 7 also is a private land, which is 1 kilometer away from locality 1 towards the west, which is the Harappan Symmetry. But you can see the portion which is intact. It is so intact. So if we are able to protect the intact portion, that is also enough because we can continue research here for 200 years and try to understand about the Harappan cities and Harappan lifestyle. So here you can see what we did. In fact, I just wanted to give you history of the Harappan culture, how it began, and how there is a transformation from early levels to the Harappan civilization phase. So we did, of course, this particular section that you see on the left hand side. Now this section is almost 24-meter thick, the thickest deposit found anywhere, in fact, at any Harappan site. And here, in fact, we have early Harappan phase in the lower levels and the mature Harappan phase in the upper levels. And we can, there's so much clear evidence about the transformation happening from the earliest beginning at the site to the most developed phase at the site. So that kind of evidence, that kind of history is quite clear, in fact, at a number of places. Virana, which was excavated by the Archaeological Survey of India. Virana Kunal, which was excavated by the State Department of Archaeology. in 70s and 80s. Now, those sites also are very important because at these sites, for the first time, in the lowermost levels, some pits were identified, and later, it was quite clear that these are the pit dwellings. This is how people began to live in fact in this area. And then I'm going to show some of the pit dwellings. But then also from pit dwellings there is a transformation to the upper on the overground, and from overground to a well planned land settlement. So this evidence was quite clear in fact at the site of Birana and many other sites. But you can see these are the remains of the pit dwellings. These are from the earliest levels. And what is important here is that these pits are in cluster. In one cluster, we see three or four pits. One of them may have been used for living purpose. One pit may have been used for kitchen purpose. One for storage, like that. So that is the kind of evidence. Now, this identification is based on actual evidence found in these pit dwellings. So this is the kind of evidence now we find in the earliest levels, dated to around 6,000, 5,500 BC. You can see, in situ remains of maybe, upper, veteran daub remains, and also the in situ remains of, the domestic hearth in these pits. And then, of course, in the next level, you can see, that people have transformed from pit dwelling to circular structure, of course, but overground structures. So this is in the second phase. And then, of course, in the third phase, we can see that they have now started developing the architecture which is typical Harappan in nature. Of course, in the third phase, the structures are small. They're rectangular or squarish in shape. They're small, but they have used typical Harappan bricks for the construction. You can see here, there is evidence of burnt bricks also, which were mostly used for making their bathrooms and toilets. So the concept of bathroom and toilets starts appearing, maybe in the third phase in the in the history of the architecture of the Harappans. And the mud bricks were used for constructing the walls of the structure. Also, we have the earliest evidence of tandoor also, which continues till today. And then, of course, in the fourth stage, you can see the modicum of planning. This is the evidence from the site of Farmana. Now you can see that there is a main street here. There are small streets, lanes, and by lanes also, and structural complexes are located on either side. So now we can see a modicum of planning properly. This is happening. This happens in fact in the fourth stage, and in the last stage, this is a full-fledged town. This is of course the evidence from the site of Mohenjo-daro, because Mohen, Mohenjo-daro is excavated on a very large scale. So this is how the Harappan cities have grown, in fact, gradually from simple pit dwellings to a well-established town planning, which was very well maybe well planned. Also, most of the time, maybe cities and towns had fortification walls. They had very important, impeccable drainage system, which is maybe considered to be one of the wonders in fact in the ancient world. And also, we they developed the water harvesting, water management system in fact. So this is how these people have the Harappan people have grown in fact from simple pit dwellings to the so this is a very important evidence that we have. And this particular evidence clearly indicates that the same people were continuously developing into a finer phase uh, there. And the same evidence is also found in fact in the pottery. So the pottery found, this is the kind of pottery that we find in fact in the lowermost levels, which is not very well made, which is not well fired, which is not smooth, looks crude, handmade pottery. But in the next stage, because pottery becomes starts becoming refined, and in the next stage, of course, the classical Harappan pottery emerges. So there is a quite good evidence about the growth of some of the basic crafts. So this is quite clear in fact in the pottery, and also we are working on other material culture. And then of course I come to the most important part of our excavation, that is the symmetry excavation at Symmetry Mound number 7, which is a symmetry. So some part of that of course was excavated earlier by Archaeologists of India. So this is the part that was excavated by our ASI. And then of course this is the area that we excavated. The symmetry is spread over an area of at least we have calculated around 3.5 hectare, but it appears that it is much bigger. But now we cannot detect because a lot of maybe areas of symmetries have been destroyed by the farmers. So there is no way to know in fact what is the exact maybe area of the symmetry. Also, whether Harappans had only one cemetery or there were multiple cemeteries, that is also not clear because the area around the site is all under modern occupation or under cultivation. So most of the evidence may have been destroyed. But then we started this work here, and we learned a lesson from our previous excavation at the Farmana, at the site of Farmana. One of the objectives at Farmana was to extract DNA from the skeletal remains because only that can give us clue as to who are the people and their relation with the contemporary population, with their blood group relation, etc. So I was very keen to understand this, and we wanted to generate scientific data at the site of Farmana, but we did not take proper precaution. When we came in contact with the scientists from Seoul National University from the Department of Forensic Science, they suggested that we change our methodology. So before the excavation, we took this type of precaution. He is not a corona warrior in fact, but this is a burial warrior at the site of Rakhigardi. So we took this type of precaution, made sure that there's only one brush for the same brush is not used for other burial, and also the tools that we use, they were not really used for the other burials. So we wanted to make foolproof precaution. We did not want any kind of contamination happening in fact, because it is very when we started this research maybe in 2013-14, the DNA science have not developed so much as it has developed maybe in last couple of years. So now it is possible to separate ancient DNA and modern DNA, but not that time in fact, the way when we initiated. And it is a very, very expensive method in fact. If you want to understand, or the find out the ancient and modern DNA, then it is very, very expensive. So it is better to take precaution and make sure that our DNA does not get into the ancient DNA. So that is what we did in fact. This kind of precaution we took at the site, and then we started excavating all the burials. We have excavated nearly 62 burials at the site of Rakhigardi, and all the burials are excavated by following this strict precaution that was required in fact for the excavation of the burials. Second, the second mistake that we committed was that at Farmana was that we excavated maybe 70 burials at one and the same time. We kept them open for almost 2 months because we wanted people to go and see the evidence, so that there is no misunderstanding among the people. So in what happened is in fact because they were open for long, because of the changing climatic conditions, maybe sometimes there are rain, sometimes strong sun. Because of that, the DNA, whatever DNA may have been there, that completely slipped away from the skeletal remains. And at the end, in spite of our best efforts, we could not succeed in getting DNA at Farmana. So here, we changed the method. We excavated one burial only at a time. After the excavation, we documented that burial immediately. In the third stage, we collected the samples, packed them properly, and sent to our laboratory in Deccan College, Pune. And then, of course, after in the laboratory, we took the same precaution. The kind of data that we have found, this is one of the well-preserved burials at the site of Rakhigardi. We also found two, maybe some multiple burials, a male and female burial. And here, I made a statement on the basis of this our research that these are maybe they have got a relationship which is maybe acceptable to the society for these two, maybe a male and female. And I propose that probably the concept of marriage in fact started during the Harappan times, because most of the traditions that we follow today, they in fact the origin of the genesis of that goes to the Harappan times. So probably the marriage concept also may have started. This is because we found out that this particular skeletal remain is found in a common cemetery. They would not have buried it if they had maybe some kind of illicit relationship. They would not have buried, in fact, in the common cemetery. Secondly, they have followed the same custom as they have followed for the other burials, which they may not have done otherwise. And because of that, we feel that this the relationship between these two may have been maybe legal, in fact, and acceptable to the society. So this is the kind of evidence we have found. Close up of that. Also some other burials that we found at the site of. So from the burials, one can make out the status of the person, economic status, and also the social status, because you find a lot of burial goods in the form of pottery, maybe beads, or the ornaments and weapons. So the number, quality, and the quantity varies from burial to burial, depending upon maybe economic and the social status. There are some burials where you find large number of pots. There are some burials which have got maybe one or two pots. So that indicates relative maybe hierarchy of the people uh, in the Harappan society. So then in the next stage, of course, we also did before the lifting in Patna, we did a lot of sampling. Here, one method that we tried was to extract or get, if there is any evidence, the evidence of the parasite eggs. Now, this is very important because the Korean scientists, they had extracted, they found the parasite eggs from ancient bodies, and even from the parasite eggs, they could identify DNA of the ancient people. If you don't get DNA from the bones, perhaps this was another way, another method by which we could have also got DNA from them. So what we did in the fact, that we did a lot of sampling to find out whether there is a survival of the parasite eggs. So parasite eggs, we all of us have parasite eggs in our body, but after the death, these parasite eggs remain. They do not get disintegrated in the soil, and they can remain. And those that data was recovered by the Korean scientists. We tried that also at the site of Rakhigardi, but of course we could not succeed because the period is quite old here in fact at Rakhigardi. Whereas in Korea, of course, the period was around 500 years old, whereas here it is almost you know almost 4,500 years old. So same precaution was taken in fact in the laboratory also. We uncovered in laboratory in the samples, we cleaned them properly, and then of course after that only we send the samples to CCMB in Hyderabad for extraction of DNA, because for the extraction of DNA you need clean room, and CCMB has this particular facility. And then of course the kind of scientific studies that we do, every possible scientific research was done. In fact, we have done anthropological examination which is published in international journal. Then we have done CT scanning. That data is used for the reconstruction of the facial feature. Then also we have of course done the craniofacial reconstruction. Then paleoparasitology. I talked about the ancient parasite eggs. So that is called the paleoparasitology science. We tried that also. And then, of course, we did sampling for ancient DNA and stable isotope analysis. So DNA, of course, I'm going to speak, and the stable isotope analysis has shared a lot of light on the health and the diet of the people. So this is the kind of research that we have done, and we have already published all this research that we have done. So what happened in fact at Rakhigardi? The story is like that. We examined all the burials, and we did not succeed in getting DNA in the burials that we examined. Only there are three burials which had given us very faint evidence of DNA survival, but that was so faint that we could not have made any head or or tail of that out of that. But then we were about to maybe abort. We thought that perhaps we would not succeed in getting DNA from the skeletal remains at from the Harappan sites, because firstly the data is very old. Secondly, the climate and the maybe soil is not favorable for the preservation of the DNA, so we may not find DNA at all. But this is the maybe skeletal remain. This is the skeleton of a lady whose status must have been quite high in the society, because you can see so many pots as burial goods by the side of this. So this was the final burial which was examined from point of view of DNA research. And here we found a very strong authentic DNA of the Harappan people in this particular. So we have at this stage only one skeleton remain which has given us a strong DNA. We need of course more samples. But even though it is one, it is like testing rice in fact, whether it is cooked or not. We just maybe taste one grain of rice and not the entire rice. So it is like that. If you have also DNA from one skeletal remain from the Harappan period, that is that has got tremendous implication on history. So this was analyzed by us, and then of course we have the results. In fact, what happens? We also have analyzed the data from the earlier period also, and now it is becoming clear now that maybe around 10,000 BC or 12,000 years ago, the hunter gatherers, they split into two groups. One group, of course, came to South Asia. You can see here, one branch came to South Asia, and one branch went to Iran. So the Iranian, maybe the hunter gatherers and the Indian hunter gatherers, they had common ancestry. So that is reflected, of course. This is the common ancestry that we find, in fact, in the Indian and the Iranian population. But as they came to South Asia, they started developing their own ancestry because they were not getting mixed up with any other population here in South Asia. Whereas in the Iranians were getting mixed up with the Anatolian farmers, and that is how this is how they have different maybe genetic history here. Whereas in Indian subcontinent or in South Asia, they were developing their own ancestry, which was quite different from the Iranian ancestry and the steppe ancestry. And the same ancestry now has come into the Harappan people. And from Harappan, it has continued till today. We have examined nearly 3,500 modern samples and of different groups available in the Indian subcontinent or in South Asia. 140 different groups. So these people are from different religion, from different caste, from different creed, and we have examined all. And interestingly, all of them have the same ancestry, which is very important. And the ancestry is, it matches very well with the Harappan ancestry. And there is other mixing, of course. Maybe around 25 to 30% is Harappan ancestry. The remaining, of course, is maybe 5% maybe Iranian ancestry, 5% steppe ancestry, etc. But the bulk of that, the ancestry from whom they evolved was the Harappan ancestry. So today, in fact, from Afghanistan to Bengal and from Andaman to Kashmir, we have people, in fact, who are all descendants of the Harappan people. So this is very important. This is what we found, and also we found that that the that the Harappans were not carrying any genetic signatures from Iranian related ancestry. This is extremely fascinating and indicative that agriculture in South Asia was invented and practiced by the indigenous people. This sets aside the previous belief that the farming was brought by Neolithic Iranians. Also, it is evident that the movement of Harappans was towards Central Asia. We always thought that the Aryans came from Central Asia, but we do not have evidence for that. What we have, in fact, is very different evidence. We have, analyzed the samples from the site of Gonur in Turkmenistan, which is a typical steppe site in that part, and contemporary with Harappans, because in the excavation we did find they did find some Harappan material there. So they had skeletal remains which we analyze. We found DNA from that, and also the other site called Shari Sokta in Iran. So these two sites were examined by us, and what we found was very interesting. We did find Harappan gene present in fact in Shari Sokta, skeletal remains, and also in Gonur, skeletal remains, but we did not find their gene in fact present in fact in the Harappan people, Harappan population. So that means the Harappans first began to go out, and then of course maybe there is a reciprocal movement happening. So we are now for the first time we are proposing the out of India theory on the basis of the presence of Harappan like ancestry in Turkmenistan and Iran population. So which is continued to the mature Harappan period. So this is very very important. And then of course genetically step is interrogation in South Asia has not happened until 1000 BC on large scale. And furthermore, in fact, mixing with steppe was gradual and not sudden. This rejects the invasion or replacement of the local South Asians with the steppe population. So this clearly rejects the invasion of the Aryans, in fact, from outside. And steppes have arrived to India and mixed up with the local population and exchanged their genetic material, but not the ancestry, knowledge, and culture. We have also observed that there was a great deal of variance due to differential mixing with diverse local population. The increase of steppe in south is probably due to much concentration of the steppe at the region after 1000 BC. So these are some of the maybe important conclusions that we could draw from this, and it has got tremendous implication impact on the history. So what happens in fact now, probably this the development of South Asian ancestry started in fact in the northwest part of the subcontinent or South Asia, and then of course it began to spread gradually in fact in different parts of the of India or South Asia. In mid Ganga basin, of course, the same people came in maybe around 6500 BC. Then maybe around 4500 BC, in Mewar region of Rajasthan. Then around 3000 BC to other parts like Deccan, South India, Central India, etc. And same is the case with East and Northeast India. In fact, we don't know much about the Northeast India because the Northeast has a different population altogether. But this is how maybe gradual growth was happening, gradual maybe dispersal was happening. Maybe from here, they started moving in fact towards mid Ganga basin, and also maybe some people from mid Ganga towards the maybe the Ahar region or the Ganesh or Jodhpura, in Marwar region, and then Ahar region in fact in Mewar, and then from here of course to maybe Central India, then Deccan and South India. So gradual growth, gradual dispersion is happening. So we are working on this particular issue also, and you can see that that Harappans were not the only people that time. In fact, there were a number of other contemporary regional cultures which were there. In fact, so all of them, the Harappans and the contemporary population, in fact, they had interaction with each other. Then you will find that except this maybe this area, from Kashmir to Andaman and from Afghanistan to Bengal, in fact, we have the population which has got the same ancestry, the Harappan ancestry. then you will wonder that why there is a maybe difference in the complexion. People from maybe Punjab, Haryana look different. People from Maharashtra look different. People from South India look different. Now, this complexion has nothing to do with the genetic history, but it has to do with maybe the geography, the climate, food habit, etc. On the basis of that only, this complexion is developed. So, India, in fact, is an ethnic museum. In fact, we have such a variety. No other continent has such a huge variety as Indian subcontinent has, and all of them, in fact, have the common ancestry, which is very important. I'll show you the location of Gonur. In fact, it's a site which was excavated by the Turkish archaeologists, sorry, Turkmenistan archaeologists, and the site of Shari Sopka in Iran that was excavated by some uh, some European and the Iranian archaeologists. So both were contemporary to the Harappans, contemporary to the Rakhigardi. Both the sites have produced archaeological data indicating contact with the Harappans because there are some Harappan material found there. And now it is becoming clear that this population here has Harappan gene present, and here also the Harappan gene. So maybe people started moving back from Rakhigardi or from Harappan region to Iran and then to maybe Turkmenistan. And then of course the reciprocal movement happens later, and then after that only you find more arrival. After 2000 BC, of course, now we have more steppe people coming here, and that is but natural because that the gate was open in that the Pandora box was already open by the Harappans, and then they started following the route which was developed by the Harappans. And finally, now I am going to show you the how the Harappan people look like. In fact, so this is the final part of my presentation. And here you can see, we need for the reconstruction, we need complete sculptural data. And fortunately, we have complete sculptural data. So we have one, this is a male, in fact, around 18 or 19 years old Harappan male. You can see that, it is like he's 6 feet tall, well built, Harappan man. And then, of course, we have the Harappan woman, which is around 45 years old. And this is the data. So we have reconstructed the face of both, in fact, the Harappan male and the Harappan female. And the method that we use, of course, this type of data is very required because you need the anatomical, maybe data from maybe inside. So that inner anatomical data was retrieved through this particular method, through this scanning, MRI scanning, and then of course we use we also had metric data like the measurements of the bone. So the scanning data and the metric data was put in the computer, and then of course computer started generating step by step. Maybe this is the reconstruction of the skull portion, and then of course slowly the muscle and flesh was placed, and finally the skin portion. So this is how the Harappan boy 19, 18 or 19 years old boy looked like. And same, of course, the Harappan woman, in fact, this is how the Harappan woman looked like. And if you compare them with the modern, in fact, the Harappan boy looks like a modern Haryana boy. And the woman, in fact, Harappan woman, and the modern woman, they look like. So that means, there's a continuity in the appearance also for last almost 4,500 years. So this is also very, very important evidence. We have generated, maybe, three more, we have reconstructed three more individuals, and we have submitted paper. So these two, the beneficial research that we did on these two sculpture remains, they have already that has been published already. So we are publishing three more, and we are going to show how the Harappan look like. So finally, to conclude my talk, I would like to mention that neither early Iranian farmers nor steppies have contributed to the making of South Asian ancestry. That is quite clear now. No change or breakage in the ancestry of major South Asian population for last 12,000 years, which is very important. If people had come from outside, there could have been breakage in fact in the cultural history as well as genetic history. But we do not have that breakage anywhere in fact in South Asia. The implying Neither large-scale migration nor invasion of the so-called Aryans from outside South Asia happened. And different human complexions develop in South Asia due to factors like geography, climate, food habits, etc. And genome has no role to play in this respect. Most of the developments, such as domestication, settled life, village life, city life, knowledge system, Indian knowledge system, etc., were authored by the indigenous people, which is very, very important, not people coming from outside. Then movement of the people and ideas between different continents was happening right from the prehistoric times, resulting in adoption of certain cultural elements and mixing of genes. That was also happening, you know, quite regularly, in fact, right from the beginning of this life. Then we have new evidence on the Aryan invention theory and the Vedic people and culture. I can give a separate talk, in fact, on the Aryan invasion and the Vedic people because there is so much to tell about that. There is so much evidence, and so maybe in separate lecture I can do that. Then most of the South Asians are descendants of Harappans, and probably there is a continuity in appearances also. Possibly Harappan spoke Proto-Indo-European language, that is Sanskrit. Again, maybe I need to discuss this issue in great detail. So maybe in separate lecture I can talk that. Then implying gene flow from South Asia into Sharisukta and Kunur, a strong case to suggest out of India movement theory. This is just a maybe indicator. We need more data, of course. Now, I'm not claiming that we have reached to the conclusion, but there's a strong indicator, that there is a out of India theory can be developed. And the knowledge system, philosophies were transmitted by oral system, from generation to generation, and then transform into formal education when the world's earliest and great universities like Taxila, Nalanda, Vikramshila, etc. were established. So this is how we know that the knowledge that was developed by the Harappans may have continued through oral tradition first, and then after the universities were established, then it was given a formal education system. So this is what and the future plan, of course, we want to generate, of course, more data from the site of Rakhigardi, because in Rakhigardi also there may be different groups. We need to identify that. Also, we have to identify the relation between Harappans and the contemporary population, and also we need more data, in fact, from different cultural periods, and that is what we want to maybe target in next 3 to 5 years of our research. So it's a good beginning, but we need more data, and whatever indications that we are getting, they need to be substantiated more, in fact, with the scientific data that now we would like to generate. So thank you very much. I again take this opportunity to thank the authorities of the Mythical Society for inviting me here and giving me this opportunity to interact with all of you.